What's happening? Benton here. Double daring deaths, dystopia of destruction. And what's the rest of this? Deprivation. I don't even know my own title. One moment, please. I made this yesterday. We made the stream. By the way, check out my posts tab, formerly the community tab. My new favorite live streamer was live last night, and it was perhaps the greatest live stream I've ever witnessed. I won't even attempt to explain it. Let's see. Shout out to the chat. Trying to get my my title of my stream here. Double daring deaths, dystopia of destruction, deprivation, and depravity. Indeed, we will get into, or I will get into spiritual topics, existential topics. Well, I guess more nature of the realm topics, because you can't call it a world anymore, right? The Earth, on account of flat Earth, right? Can't call it a world or a planet. Now it's a realm. Starting a little bit early, but about to roll out of the truck stop here in, where are we? Tom's Brook, Virginia. I think there's a Tom's River, New Jersey or something, or Pennsylvania. I get confused with, but yeah, Tom's Brook, Virginia, I think. I've been here on a 34-hour restart. So now we have a fresh cycle, fresh 70 hours to work. And I was fortunate enough to make it to a Walmart day before yesterday. Got stocked up on, not fully stocked up. I bought the last of the apricots, the jarred apricots. Would have liked to have had more, but such is life. I got stocked up on eggs, of course. Give me just a moment. In an effort to take care of my teeth, let me rinse this coffee off my teeth. And then the balancing of the live streaming with my schedule. You know, I might be inclined to have some apricots at this time. However, I don't like to eat on stream. So I was thinking about that earlier, you know, sort of, not that I view it as giving to the audience, because the reality is I do all of this for my own purposes. Now, an audience, you know, clearly is part of that. As I've noted before, I have spoken into a digital audio recorder for many hours. In fact, filling up the SD card, deleting the SD card and filling the SD card up again when I had first started truck driving, my rookie season. That was like 100 hours without an audience. I'm certainly capable of speaking without listeners, but why not? And then obviously the generous donations over time. In fact, a sizable portion of my income during my time as a homeless person sleeping in his car in Echo Park, Los Angeles. Enjoyed it thoroughly. So thank you for that, donators. Shout out to Replay Crew. Looking at the numbers, there's not too much of a Replay Crew. Although, you know, based on the topics and the frequency of these streams, I'm not that surprised at the views. And then also, not necessarily truth community or panelverse stream, but just in general, I've noticed live stream numbers seem to be down, probably, you know, as more and more options are available and then perhaps some of the novelty wearing off, for the audience being an issue, but a potential issue, I should say. What's up, Razvan? Good to see you, sir. I'm about to roll out. The place I'm delivering to, they don't open until 8, and I don't know that I have an appointment time. All I was told was to get there, deliver by the time they close. I think they probably stopped taking trucks at 3 p.m. And it's interesting, in an information age in truck driving, and I'm assuming this is some sort of a brokered load, and it becomes virtually impossible, as I'm assuming Razvan knows. I don't know what it's like in Europe, though, or the UK, but it's effectively impossible, for me to find out ahead of time, do I have an appointment? Is it first come, first serve? I go to the Google reviews, and it's mostly people complaining about long load times, but then I'm delivering. So presumably if they need this product right away, then I would be unloaded right away. Right? Perhaps. One moment while we negotiate the entrance / exit of the truck stop. Almost always folks parked right in the entrance at this time of the morning. And then also, a factor of all of this being, the earlier I start my clock, the 14-hour clock, then that introduces the possibility of, waiting around to get a load. I don't mind the waiting around, waiting around for dispatch to figure out what they want to do. And then it seems like the majority of the truck drivers, don't obsessively start out as early as reasonably possible every morning, such as I do. And I was ready to roll 2 hours ago. I waited around, But this way, at least I'll be getting there as soon as they open, or, pretty close to when the place opens at 8 a.m. Have a leisurely drive. 4.5 hours, I think it is. 4 hours and 16 minutes. It says I get there at 7:30, but certainly I will stop. Although I almost always beat what the GPS says. It's still a handy guide, right? And since it's New Jersey, even though it seems to be a fairly modern, not ancient facility, but looking at it, the facility from the satellite view, it's just big enough for day cabs to get 53-foot trailers, into the place and to and fro from the docks. So I'll be looking like a bozo in a sleeper truck, trying to park to check in, and then, trying to make it to the dock when it's my turn. Because these day cabbers, it's set up for a blind side. There's nowhere to actually do a U-turn. And these day cab guys are hitting docks all day, so they just blindside in. But yeah, we're not doing a blindside. So, and then recognizing on the heels of all of this, the recent spiritual leveling up, and I want to go back real quick to the reasons for the live streams. Is that not out of it helps me to organize my thoughts by speaking aloud. Right. And in fact, if anybody's familiar with the Myers-Briggs, all the INTJ, ENTJ, the 16 personality types, which is a theory system. It's not a science, but it seems like a lot of folks find some credence in that MBTI, Myers-Briggs. So for someone such as myself who always tests INTJ, then dominant introverted intuition, but then the secondary function is extroverted thinking, which does lend itself to a person who likes to talk to themselves, and this is me talking to me. And I do this in my own head. I have entire conversations in my head. I don't hear anything though. There's no sound. It's at a level of perception. It's not a sound because lest we get accused of hearing voices. Well, no, I hear nothing. I have a perception. Even music, which I'm able to play in my head, I don't hear it. I perceive it. It's subtle. It's hard to explain, but it's not a sound. And if there's 5 people at 3:20 a.m. or whatever time it is in their time zone, the up all night crew, and then if I'm live long enough to bleed over into morning crew, coffee crew, early morning coffee crew, all the better. But and I have some thoughts around truck driving and proper rest. I do seem to be leveling up my ability to rest, which is all I did. Almost all I did. I did have one interesting encounter, at least possibly multiple encounters with my fellow humans, perhaps. Now we have phantom 60 miles an hour for a non-existent construction zone. When they finished, did they take everything but the speed limit signs with them? Maybe the state trooper said, "Hey, if y'all don't mind, leave them signs up for about a month and come back for them. I'm going to write some tickets." But yeah, let me see how many topics I'm able to discuss simultaneously. Number one, looking at the facility, and then, some of this in the past was based on my own lack of talent when it comes to backing these rigs. However, from my perspective, I'm able to always do the job properly, meaning the product gets loaded or unloaded and I don't crash into anything or damage anybody's property, right? And no blemishes on Benton's record. But I've realized even when I do the backing in the exact same amount of time, if I get lucky and just nail everything perfectly the first time, perhaps I do it in effectively the exact same amount of time as another trucker. But the way I do it just looks bizarre. So as soon as I start setting up and backing, I'm triggering these other drivers' alarm bells. And there's this whole thing in trucking that's not really spoken about, but it's like the hazing of anybody who seems like they might be inexperienced or a rookie. We must haze them, right? So, heads are whipping around. Attention is being directed towards Benton as he. Meanwhile, it's going to probably be all a bunch of people in day cabs, right? And they're already angry about their day. They're angry about their lives in many ways, in this heaven or hell realm manifesting as a hell realm. So then we get into anger seeking an outlet, right? Oh, well, let's become angry and frustrated towards this bozo. But nonsensically, it's like, yeah, I'm backing up and I'm strange and awkward in my backing up. Who cares? What's it matter? And by the way, I have a longer rig than everybody else who's here right now. So I'm actually not doing the same thing you folks are doing, but that's okay. It's a little bit different. And they have a window in the day cab. They can look out the window also for blind sides. I'd have to go into the sleeper and this truck just happens to have a window on the side of the sleeper. I could use that once I get to a certain angle. And then, having made peace with, in years ago, part of the leveling up was making peace with, I can't do anything about any of that. And, earlier iterations of Benton would have been predisposed to trying to explain all of this to people. Well, actually, this, that, and the third. Well, actually, they're in their feelings. So it doesn't, the law, you cannot, it's not possible for logic, generally speaking, to penetrate a person who's in a state of emotion. And then, which reminds me of picking up a load last week, I believe it was, and some guy is coming out of the shipper office, or I think he was leaving his rig and going into the shipper office as I was setting up to back into the dock. And I can tell by his body language and the fact that the lady had already told me that there was at least one trucker who was out there waiting for the proper pickup information from his company. And meanwhile, here comes Benton with a different company, just rolls right up, saunters into the shipping office, and immediately gets told what dock to back into because I have proper pickup information. I've certainly been him. I've certainly been the person stuck like Chuck, looking like a bozo, without the proper information. So then he's like, look, he's mean mugging what I'm doing, and then starts making these gestures with his hands as if, but his whole countenance is like based on this idea that I'm doing something wrong. It's like, I know I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Right. And then just from an authority standpoint, these studies around, or social experiments of just show up in a reflective vest with a clipboard and start ordering people around in public. And more often than not, your average normie bozo will accept that authority, right? So, if I'm willing to play into his notions that I'm doing something wrong, air quotes, meanwhile, what if I was? Like, what could I possibly be doing wrong? Like, backing into the dock, but like not in the way that he would back into the dock, which is the word of mouthing and the common sensing of everything. Part of that is this notions around what I call word of mouthing, and then what people might refer to as common sense. Well, of course, after the driver does a U-turn and sets up for their backing in maneuver, right? Well, of course they do it this exact way. Well, maybe some drivers drive all the way around the backside and do their U-turn over there, and it just turns out that I'm really good at U-turns, and I know I have enough space to do a U-turn, and they don't, right? So maybe they're just like, how dare he not drive all the way around back like we did to do our U-turn? But it's like, well, actually, I just pulled forward. I didn't even do a U-turn now that I think about it. I pulled forward all the way to this is not an exit where the cars come in and out, and then I just backed in and sort of did like an alley dock, right? But there's more than one way to skin a cat. And people might say, well, why is he describing all of this psychology to us? Well, part of why I say don't ever become a lay expert in human psychology, it will ruin your life, or more correctly, it has ruined my life in certain ways, although that's not exactly true. That's sort of I'm saying that tongue in cheek, sort of that's self-deprecating in a way, because it's certainly quite advantageous at times, but then certainly a blessing / curse. It's all blessings. Well, if it's all blessings, isn't it all curses? Well, I guess that would then depend upon, one's perspective, would it not? That would be a matter of perspective necessarily. But as I become more and more adept to, working with whatever's going on inside of me at the level of my emotion, right? And this is the double daring of the realm. So if you're, this is what I mean. It's a metaphorical throwing down of the gauntlet, just saying, I'm all in to the realm, saying, hey, realm, do your worst. And meanwhile, it's a blessing in a way if the realm does its worst, because if I live long enough, I will fully master my emotions. I will fully master my thoughts. As Jack Talcott, another YouTube channel / panel verser / content creator / grifter, right? Receiver of donations at times. He claimed credit on his own website for having achieved that. Well, I know I haven't achieved it. Day by day, moment by moment, I am becoming more and more a manifestation of just that. And I will manifest that. Are they going to make me go into this way station? This is crazy. Make me drive into a way station. It's been a minute since I drove into a way station. Most likely could just drive on by on the highway and be completely fine. But some of these, when they're unmanned, they'll still have it open, and then everybody gets the bypass lane, and so you just drive through. which I believe is what's happening here. Yeah, all I see is a green light for bypass lane that's not changing. But they are set up for the way in motion and the in-cab bypass signals. So I'm not quite sure what this is all about, but whatever. But as I suspected, I could have just flown by at 71 on the interstate and everything would have been just fine. Out of an abundance of caution, we entered into the scales. Yeah, nobody's here on behalf of the state of the state. So back to the something I talked about 15 minutes ago, I guess. You know, this idea of it's an information age, but I'm flying blind to some extent going to this place to get unloaded, uh, 247 miles down the road. Speaking of, let me make sure I'm on the right road here. I think I am. Yes, I am. Just wanted to double check. Because originally the route was going to send me through the Washington, D.C. Beltway. And I remember thinking, like, that's weird. But then it adjusted itself at a certain point. It said, well, actually go this other way. I was like, yeah, that makes more sense. Why would we drive through rush hour Washington, D.C. traffic? That makes no sense when we don't have to. The Beltway. Anyway, inside the Beltway, as it may be. One moment, I'm parched. Have a little water here. So in the past, I certainly, because of all of the meditation and observing of myself within my own sphere of influence, I remember what it used to be like to encounter these exact scenarios starting my day, and then remembering experiencing the emotional frustration, anxieties, my own tendency to catastrophize, which still exists. Uh, but then simultaneously, with the new practice of proper identification within myself, meaning to, if I'm not prop, so the only thing, the only cause of fear, anxiety, trepidation, avoidance, whatever would negative procrastination, negative states of being inside myself, that is only ever has one cause, and that cause is to fail in the moment or series of moments to properly identify within myself, and specifically to identify mind, body, and spirit consistent with my essence or nature. And my essence or nature, I know at a level of experience within myself, although you would have to take my word for it or not, because this is not my direct experience, is not something that I can package and present to you as evidence. I'm convinced within myself, because of my direct experience, that my nature is one with the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level, the greatest light possible, and the source of that light. That is that's the source from whence my soul originates, and dare I say, will return to after this experience. And in fact, probably sense, and that in some aspect, this realm or this human experience that I am experiencing, or series of experiences, is in fact a delusion on some level. Most likely, I'm speculating, but it's in part the delusion that my essence even can be separated from that larger whole, which is when we do hear certain content creators from time to time say we are all one at the highest level, I would say, well, okay, perhaps that's true. However, that would depend upon what am I willing to accept as we in this context. Meanwhile, you know, why is this person attempting to put all of humanity onto one team? But what purpose is being achieved that would necessarily serve that being who's saying the thing, if we understand the nature of that being, or at least the expression of that being's nature. I shouldn't say the nature of the being, right? More so the belief system that's being acted upon, right? Or agenda of the being, more properly, or agendas. And so, what is the value of these live streams to the listener? It's to listen to a form of intelligence perform. That's all this is. No, it's not all this is. I shouldn't say that. But this is a performance of a process of intelligence that is going to occur anyway, right? And in my own limitation, I find benefit in the spoken aloud portion of the performance, even if there's no audience. So why not, let there be an audience? Why not perform for? And it's, small audience. That's all the better. In a way, that's all the better, because it's almost only going to be folks who find enough value that they say, well, I could be doing other things, and maybe one of the five will say that, oh, that's right, I could be doing other things, and go off and do other things. That's also fine. Perhaps there's more value to that individual, right? And a lot of what I see in, again, back to the word of mouthing and the common sensing of everything, or at least humanity's desire to do that, well, that's going to be situational, and that's always going to be from the perspective of an individual, right? Value is going to be contextual. And then also, where is the being in their progression, if they're in a progression? Best case scenario, I would want to, or more, closer to what I would consider best case scenario, I would mostly be addressing folks who view their lives, at least in part, as existing on a progression of spiritual progress, right? And that's what I mean when I say my path is progress, meaning my life has always been conducted upon a path of spiritual progress. And perhaps I know it's the case for some other people. It certainly does not seem to be the case for every being. And I would say that here in the so-called truth community, if I dare say we, whoever those individuals are, or are at least more predisposed to considering their lives, in that context or from that point of view, then historically what we've seen with Americans, especially Americans from the middle part of the country, as I am, culturally, historically over time, are disinclined to, again, now we're back to identity, are disinclined to identify that way. So I'm glad I brought up identity, because the process of identification only exists in the now. When I talk about the present moment, the past is dead, the future is dead in a way, right? Again, feel free to reject any of these concepts. I don't seek consensus. Please don't agree with me, unless perhaps you already do. Or if one becomes convinced of some of what I'm saying, guess what? I didn't do that. I don't do the convincing. I'm only able to convince me. If another being hears my discourse and over time becomes convinced, guess what? They did that. I didn't do that. That wasn't me that convinced. They did that. So before I sidetrack myself too much, so if the now is all that exists, and in a way it is, Certainly, I believe that to be, I know that to be supportable through logical argument. Then identifying or identity would be an unfolding, ongoing process of what? Manifestation, right? Whereby that and many other aspects of self and psychology and, forces, my force of will, all of these things, all of these various mechanisms are expressing via what? Via my creative force, which I am asserting never lies dormant and in fact always brings something, or more correctly, perhaps a collection of somethings is burst into the realm in each new moment by me. And also, as far as I can tell, by each discrete individual human, seemingly. Although I will never be able to say for sure, aka solipsism, brother Austin, if he's listening anymore, and I don't suspect he is, but that's okay. Such is the ebbs and flows of a series of human interactions that play themselves out over a period of time. But we're still, I still have a version of Yurt in my head somewhere that I'm able to converse with, and perhaps that's the case for him as well. So it continues even still. Right. Yes, right. Righto. So to identify is a process each moment, and the negative states of being that I do inhabit on a spectrum, right? And it is a mixture, certainly. It's not to only experience fear or to only experience love. It does seem possible that the being is able to seemingly experience both simultaneously, although perhaps that is the cause of much of what is referred to as PTSD. Certainly, a lot of the mind control and MK Ultra type of information refers to a specific mechanism of utilized by the program or the programmer to be, in fact, abuse that's specifically caused by attempting to inject love and fear simultaneously into the object or the person who's being programmed. And then, especially with what Brother Austin's covered, uh, near exhaustion on his channel with the MK Ultra. Certainly YouTube, the internet, these various platforms and mechanisms of the system itself, the MK Ultra programming seems to be interwoven into, effectively all. And if I'm understanding his assertions correctly, and I may not be, that it's effectively MK Ultra level program. It's just at a base level in all of society at this point. And also some of Austin's valid critiques of some of my material around mind control is, and it's kind of what good is it when I seemingly, and he may not mean me specifically, however, in an attempt to own my own possible mistakes and a self-critique, being hard on myself, if I'm even doing that a little bit and other folks are doing it a lot, what am I referring to? It's when I'm always bringing, when I'm seemingly always bringing many discussions back to this idea of, well, I've been mind controlled. And he seems to be coming from a point of view, okay, that's great. Now what? It's like, yeah, I don't really fucking know now what. Exactly, sir. Now what? I apologize if I implied that I had the solutions to seemingly being programmed in real time. Other than now what for me would be, okay, I have an ability to view myself and to operate within myself as if in some way I'm a Linux computer system, right? And I'm actually viewing the code within myself, seemingly, meaning I'm at least aware of these discrete processes, or guess what they call them in computing? These are daemons or demons. And I know Yurt's talked about this. Daemon. Ooh, well, it's computing, so we've changed the spelling. So it's less scary. Well, it's still a demon, right? So if the MK Ultra programming is running within my psychology and psyche in real time, and that was all, perhaps I'm unable to completely kill that process, because as a person who understands how to operate a Linux system, I know that I can Google how to kill a process, and then I can open up the terminal and I can type in KILL space dash whatever flags I want to utilize. And specifically, because I'm the super user, and if I'm not the super user, I have the ability as the administrator or one of the administrators in the Linux system to type SU, which means super user, and then type in the password. And now I will be operating as a super user, because the Linux system at times protects itself from accidentally wrecking itself by not allowing the person to default to super user. So I already know that when correctly identified within myself as what I am super user within my own sphere of influence in those moments in which I step into that power within myself. I am the sole power who owns and operates this discrete sphere of influence or energy sphere within the greater whole, within what very well may be this dream or delusion, right? That in which I may or may not solipsistically being existing in this moment. And my beautiful mind, my perhaps ability to grasp some form of what may be correctly termed as genius, not to be a genius, but to have access to something that may be referred to as genius, is my own ability, probably that I was born with, to abstractly interface with all of these concepts and more simultaneously within myself. That is the mic dropping, right? Not bird dropping. That is the mic dropping in this moment, right? That is the performative thing. That is the dance, right? And dare I say, what may be viewed as proud in a way by other folks, okay, or pride or arrogance being performed. Yeah, that's fine. However, why would I not be proud of overcoming myself? Now, not myself. Why would I not be proud of overcoming and transcending limitations that, as far as I can tell, have been placed upon me and continue to be placed upon me psychologically by the fucking systems that comprise the larger system? You know, dare I say, an ongoing process of MK Ultra mind control, at least on some level. What do I mean by level? I mean those processes, or in a computing sense, demons or daemons running within me. And certainly, if MK Ultra programming is running as a discrete process, computing process, or what algorithm within me, and as the super user, I allow it to continue to run when knowing I can always SU space Or as you enter password, now I'm prompted for the password. Type in the administrator password. Now I'm super user KILL space whatever arguments I want, and then the name of the MK Ultra process, and kill it. Right. Now is something else running within me at the level of an administrator who can just start it again, or more correctly, perhaps when I reboot the system, when the system reboots every night and I go to sleep, air quotes, when I boot back up every morning, does the system reboot and does the MK Ultra demon start itself on boot every morning? Because when I KILL the process, unless I go into whatever script tells the computer which processes to start every time it reboots or boots up after a cycling of power, right, and a restarting of the hardware, which is what sleep probably is on some level, unless I go in and manually tell the computer, hey, actually don't run this MK Ultra process upon boot, then it starts anew the next day, right? How about you? And this is probably what I meant when I had the epiphany, when I experienced an epiphany that I still remember many years ago, when I came to understand and comprehend that I, in fact, have access to all spiritual powers, and I actually limit myself by creating these seemingly creating blockages. Again, how are the blockages created? Well, in each new moment, which is all that exists. Back to proper identification within myself, which is one of the only a part of what's being birthed into existence via my creative force, which never lies dormant in any given moment. Now, as another user, user may be an appropriate term in this context, as a different content creator, a different YouTube channel, that person posted in my live chat recently, you know, a specific way of characterizing what exactly is going on around here, and then a specific implication as to the motive, or perhaps, my inference of what may be implied, the however accurate or inaccurate my own inference may be, which may or may not represent a spiritual attack, but probably does. And even if it doesn't, I may perhaps benefit from interpreting it as such. But then, so I would then double dare the realm at the level of spiritual attack and persecution and ridicule. And in fact, I would assert that that communication in my live chat certainly represents all of that and more, such as the skill and talent of the messenger in this instance, who may claim to serve creation and the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level, aka light, right? Or the as quickly as frequency is able to frequency or vibrate, in an oscilloscope, right? So I will then, as a human being, when I incorrectly identify in the moment within myself with anything other than my nature, to identify with anything in the moment that is not consistent with my essence or nature within myself is sin, is to miss the mark. So forget about this biblical or religious idea of sin as in guilt or shame or you ought not done that bit. And I would say, how could you possibly know whether or not I ought not do that? Or what is the capacity of another to judge or to form an opinion upon, because they ain't me? They have no way of knowing. Perhaps it was absolutely necessary that I miss the mark in that way. Perhaps that's one of the mechanisms whereby I am guided and blessed and protected spiritually within this realm by what I am within myself, meaning the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level. And in fact, that is the double daring, that is the double downing of saying, yes, realm, I am bodacious, I am ostentatious, I am bold, I am arrogant, seemingly. I am confident enough to put my name on, saying, I am that one, while knowing part of the way the realm will attack me is by saying, oh, you're saying you're God? Well, I don't know. Did I say it? When did I say it? What? Oh, now you're going to speak for me? Oh, now you're going to speak for me? So I'm pretty sure I'm the only one that can speak for me. Oh, you're going to, in the words of another content creator, you're going to represent me? How is that possible? I'm pretty sure I'm the only one that can present me, meaning I'm ultimately the only, in this delusion, whatever whatever level of consciousness has potentially fallen for the delusion. And now this would be to some of what this would speak to some of what I see as the validity of the soul trap, which I don't subscribe to whole cloth, but certainly the idea that, well, oh, there's just no validity to those ideas. No, that's to improperly apply logic. To dismiss the entirety of the ideas that comprise soul trap in my world represents a logical error or sin or missing of the mark. Right. And part of brutally applying logic to situations is, such as a conversation I had yesterday morning at the truck stop with another spiritually minded, intelligent individual, is that part of the brutal logic is I must those levels of integrity intellectually, because back to the ideas of Mark Passio, that in fact his assertions that humanity at large is enslaved to the degree that it is based upon its own refusal to perform at a high level morally. Well, in order to achieve these lofty states of logic and reason that I do exhibit and brutally and apply brutally within myself and outside of myself at times, that only works if I'm willing to slam on the brakes and say, oh, here's another being who is endowed with the ability to work within itself with logic, reason, spirit, emotion, all of these various. And this is part of the reason why I'm willing to get Dr. Breathing back, exhibiting that it also has these same abilities and characteristics that I have, and I'm watching it happen. Now, could that be some form of illusion or, hologram or whatever? Sure, it could. But then again, science apparently affirms that this entire realm on some level is illusion, illusory, or holographic. So anyway, no reason to get into that in its entirety. And this is high level discourse. for what, 45 minutes probably so far. Yeah, 50 minutes or whatever. It took me about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to get into it. So at least 30 minutes of high level discourse. Well, I accuse me of arrogance, accuse me of pride. That's fine. As long as I'm still consistent with reality, that's fine with me. You know, if if the performance can properly be characterized as, prideful, I have no issue with that. Apologies for the pause there, but other motorist poor driving necessitated strict attention paid to the road there. One vehicle's actions has rippled and slowed down many vehicles, although there's not yet traffic as far as the volume of vehicles on the road. And in fact, it was a being performing their driving in a way that probably feels safe, but in fact does not represent safety, and also inconveniences other motorists potentially. But I'm used to it because I see it all of the time. And I will not even bother to explain it. It's not that interesting. Unless I make it interesting. And it's happening again right now, but that's okay. We won't worry ourselves about that. But it's just, all that's happening is a repeated process of slowing down and speeding up and slowing down and speeding up. But none of it is necessary, meaning there's no valid reason for it logically. In fact, the reasons why it happens are pretty stupid, in my view. Part of being a human is be subjected to many stupid things every single day, no matter what. That's called life. And now it's gotten so bad that big rigs that I passed are now passing me because of how bad what is unfolding is unfolding. So we'll get back to it. Give me a moment, because now I'm curious about a thing, and I want to see if my hypothesis is correct. It's going to take a moment or two for this to play out. It's based upon mathematics, of course. Because mathematically, on occasion, a car merges onto the interstate and they're just going to drive 60 down a 7. That does happen, but mathematically, it doesn't happen a lot. So I make them prove it, because most of the time, if I attempt to pass them because they decided to merge onto the interstate at 55 to 60 miles an hour, I don't believe that they're going to continue to cruise at 60 miles an hour. And there's often an effect where, for whatever reason, people driving automobiles will attempt to drive with me for some reason, when there's other big rigs that they could attach themselves to. But this is Just happens to be one of the rare times that the people are just going to drive 60, which is completely fine. But they must prove it. I don't believe them when they merge onto the interstate at 55, because most of the time they then, within a minute or two, speed up to 70 or 75, and I never see them again. And that was a different car. The previous car, they did the exact same thing. They merged at 55 when they are supposed to merge at 70. So then if I get over for them into the middle lane, now I'm blocking the middle lane, and they just speed up and ride beside me, and I can't get back into the slow lane without doing what? Slowing down and getting behind them. So if I know I'm going to have to slow down anyway, if I'm going to choose to slow down anyway, why not slow down as soon as I see them, which is what's happening yet again. And in fact, observing a car haul ass at top speed around the bend of a on-ramp only to slow down inexplicably when they hit the merge area is it's an interesting thing to see. It has a look all its own. And definitely says something about the level of consciousness of most of the general public. And I'm just going to go 60. I mean, at this point, there's really no reason to fight what's happening here, to expend the energy when I have plenty of time to just go 60 or 62. Because human beings have decided to create traffic where none should exist. And of course, we have 3 lanes, but unfortunately, the third lane, or the fastest of the 3 lanes, that's associated with getting a speeding ticket. So few and trucks are not allowed in that lane by law. So, it's few are willing to go into that lane because they associate it with getting a ticket. Because that's to be viewed in the performance of one's life. To go into that lane and pass is to be viewed as doing something wrong, and to also feel as if there may be a punishment on the horizon. See, human psychology. And again, to be performing in the realm based upon what one probably believes to be common sense, but in fact represents no such thing. Right. Realistically. But anyway, I'll see if I can get back to wherever I was before I allowed myself to become distracted. And I think I finished most of the prior points, although I never fully fleshed out the how to identify. So something I've noticed many years ago, when I began, actually more than a decade ago, coming up on 2 decades ago, when I was seemingly compulsively, and dare I say obsessively, taking in a lot of information around religious ideas, spiritual ideas, doctrines, dogmas. And in my entire life, I've been a person who, prior to the internet, my exposure to the internet in 1994 for the first time, taking in as much information as humanly possible for myself, limited by, whatever means were limiting me. And at a certain point, again, a word of mouthing, or a person might repeat, and I might be the person. Initially, I was probably the person repeating a spiritual idea, but what? An unexamined spiritual idea. Meaning I had not myself fully examined the spiritual idea down to its most basic components, essentially unpacking, or seeking to put these ideas under a metaphorical microscope, meaning what is the smallest pieces I can break these ideas down into, such that I will see someone at times nowadays, and going back several years now, I will see someone espouse a certain idea or ethos or dogma or concept. And my immediate question is, okay, that sounds great. How? Because oftentimes the idea may represent problem solving, right? Or it may seem to represent something that is actionable, meaning it's being asserted as if something that's achievable by a being or collection of beings. And then sometimes, whether it was in a forum or YouTube comments or in a chat somewhere, I would say, okay, that's great. How? And then if there's nobody around who can describe the how or has an answer to the how, then what is even the point of, and by the way, also myself, what's the point of, prescribing, what is the point of a prescription if there's no pharmacist around to fulfill the prescription, to fill the prescription, rather? And can I make a pharmacist within myself? Well, yes, I can, and do to some extent in this metaphor, this rather unwieldy and clunky metaphor or analogy. There's the home of DM Bowman Trucking. It's got the man in the name. So back to this stuff about identity, a lot of these discourses and the purpose of these streams, part of what I am accomplishing is, well, I'm undergoing this process or these processes within myself of answering or, again, creating the pharmacist who is able to fill the prescription. I'm not going, and also the human at the level of efficiency, whether the human realizes it or not, the human most likely, because I can't be for sure, but it's always seeking efficiency by saving one's time and energy and efforts and resources. So looking for a valid reason to stop thinking, right? And then erroneously accepting this some sort of spiritual prescription as, oh, okay, there's an answer, and now I can stop thinking about this issue, or I have a reason to stop. Well, yeah, absolutely. Unless somebody says, okay, great, how? Oh, okay, now I have to think some more? Yeah, absolutely. You thought you were done? Right? And a big part of where my own practices originate from is to have accepted and continue to accept, to have accepted long ago and to continue to accept in each new moment that I'm never going to be able to, I'm most likely there will never be that moment of now we quote rest assured. The relief of a job well done, the relaxing into the security and safety that warm blanket of, okay, that particular task and toil and undertaking is resolved. And I'm here to tell you, in my estimation, what I'm describing is not even a state of being for the human. What that is that's to put on a pair of shoes that are too tight to wear them all day, only to then experience the relief at the end of the day from removing the shoes that are too tight. And then not understanding that to then identify with the relief as if it's desirable or a state to be sought, for the relief that's contained within itself represents to be in error. And okay, in this analogy, that feeling of relief is in fact a mechanism created within my psychology and most likely your psychology to serve the system at the level of marketing and advertising. The feeling of self-assuredness, relaxation of a job well done. And the job well done is by purchasing the specific product and service, right? And then how many people, when faced with an issue or problem that may seemingly, as we're speeding, unfortunately, that may seemingly, right, in the moment represent a cause for concern or fear or anxiety or trepidation, right, in the moment, within the being. And this person's just not going to let me pass it for whatever reason. I don't know why that is. I'm going between 70 and 60, and just they're right there beside me. They're just not going to let me pass them. Why this is, I have no idea. I went 70 and a 60, they were right there on my door. I went 60 and a 60, they were right there on my door. Yeah, no idea why that would be, but maybe maybe they're doing a live stream as well. I don't know. We're now going exactly 60 miles or 59 miles an hour behind the truck that I tried to go 70 to pass. After only first trying to go 65 to pass. And then saying, well, now I got a truck up my ass. I guess I'll go 70 long enough to pass this rig in front of me. And then slow back down to 65. Bizarre. Bizarre. Now, I can go 76, and their truck will only go 70, but we're not risking 15 mile an hour over the speed limit tickets. So we'll go slow as fuck for no reason until the speed limit goes back up. Am I the fastest truck on the road, or am I the slowest? Could be both. But then, so Benton, who oftentimes comes across as quite arrogant, what people think egotistical is, and all of this, but yet, and may in fact at times be accused of lacking humility, but having absolutely no problem, out here behaving as if, behaving without being identified with the speed of the vehicle at the level of who I am as a person. Right. Interesting how that works. And there probably will be less live streams because somehow I've managed to chew through way more of my data plan, in the first 6 days of the data plan, the first week of the plan than normal somehow. I do need to pace myself. All right. Maybe we can pass him now since it's up to 65. I can go as fast as 72 without really being too worried about a ticket. Yeah, we got him now. Got him. So I think the point I was attempting to make. Oh yeah, let me get back to the how does one do that? Well, the answer is whatever spiritual idea is being prescribed in the moment, which may just represent hey, would you stop talking about this, what we are all viewing as a problem? Would you knock it the fuck off? So here's some Confucius say, to shut you the fuck up, right? And it's like, okay, great. How? Meanwhile, back to what a lot of my practices have originated from the notion of being me teaching myself to be comfortable with whatever comes along with accepting and recognizing that probably I will never reach that moment of, oh, now I have a reason to rest assured. And then I, in fact, likened whatever that state of being is to the wearing of shoes that are too small all day long, simply to then experience the relief of taking them off at the end of the day. And then people, probably earlier versions of me also being confused and not realizing that, well, that's not a state that should be sought, right? To attempt to seek out that particular state would be an error, but that in fact, that is the mechanism or one of the mechanisms whereby in a nation in which the national religion based on how the people collectively behave is consumerism. So much so that I don't, even in talking to this very intelligent person that I had this conversation with, an extended long form conversation, in fact, would have been a great podcast if anybody had an ability to surreptitiously record it. Because certainly when even one of the parties knows they're being recorded, it does change the nature of the discussion, certainly, or the performance of the discussion. That is a thing, but there will be at a certain point, truck driving, which was a common, something that the two people had in common, me being one of the two people. At a certain point, it will then be extrapolated or implied that, well, all of these trucks are carrying goods that people need. Well, that's not the case. Much of what's in all of these trucks are things that people, in fact, have no need for, except that marketing and advertising via literal spiritual means within the individuals at the level of their own innate desire, perhaps, because there has to be room for doubt, for their own innate desire to perhaps worship, right? And then the installation from birth, seemingly, of the system itself having the ability to de facto design and install, or at least have control of the means by which the psychology is installed into the human, right? to therefore ensure these mechanisms that advertising and marketing then act upon within the individual, right? These various motivations and states of being that may seem desirable, such as, relax into the comfort of a job well done, whatever that sense of relief may be, and then associating that sense of relief with the purchase and services and products and brands. And then the human not understanding that the human itself, me included, has that proclivity. And it's, in fact, being expertly used against us, meaning individuals collected into a mass is addressable, or an addressable resource also is a term, also are terms from computing. So if people want to say, oh, the matrix or the simulation, well, there's probably true elements of that, right, in this experience, even if it is, you know, in a way, a delusion. And then I never fully made the point earlier. A point I never fully fleshed out earlier was this idea of conscious awareness. And then if I am the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level, you know, and, you know, if that's my essence, or now, so is the delusion, whatever that level of conscious awareness is, then somehow, and I'm not aware of this process, or if I am, I don't know that I'm aware of it, whatever may have occurred such that, you know, that force or may be so somehow is experiencing a delusion that it's possible to carve off a portion of that seemingly indivisible force and encasing it and ensnaring it and entrapping it into human flesh, a human body, and this life as experienced, you know, at the level of mind, body, and spirit by discrete beings, although I can never be certain for sure, except as, you know, my own experience bears out. And chosen to go into a truck stop, and I'm starting to wish I hadn't, because this, every once in a while, it's possible to take an exit from the interstate at 4:30 a.m., but the side road is at present lots of side road traffic. So we're sitting and waiting. Now we're going. Now, how do I get into the truck stop is the question. Or is there a truck stop? And if there is, where is the truck stop? For my, we're missing the truck stop. It's in fact not a right, it's a left. I'm sorry, it's not a left, it's a right. So now we're going to try to make a turn, but traffic is coming. I think we've got it. Yeah. Oh, I remember this truck stop. Yeah. And that, folks, is why I almost always, and here's the common sensing and the word of mouthing, people would say, well, why bother to tell the GPS to guide you into the truck stop? Well, because as a human, I'm capable of trying to turn into the wrong business. I have that ability. So, and I'm more set up for visual cues than, especially when I'm in a process of allowing myself to be distracted into simultaneously performing other tasks. Thus, in some form, performing my job as a truck driver more or less on autopilot when possible, right? And yeah, okay, here we go. Here we go. And then as there's exactly one truck who's been behind me almost this entire time. And it reminds me that some folks prefer to be led into an area versus leading the way. For me, it's situational. But that's neither here nor there, certainly. But we'll get back into the discourse. Lots of interesting topics to be discussed. So, shout out to Seven in the house. As why did for some reason, my logs, the software that runs my logs decided to close itself out bizarrely. Like, I need to go off duty, man. I'm driving on my logs right now, even though I'm not driving. This is crazy. Drove an hour and 14. We'll take care of the needs of the vessel here by depositing some of my bodily fluids into a vessel, by the way, inside of a truck, which is a vessel. Are we off duty yet? Nope, still not. Now we are. Now we're off duty. Well, it's at least an opportunity to see how the old kidneys are doing. Yep, not too shabby. Not too shabby. Pert near optimal, if I dare say. And I do. Make sure that I think I was going to do something else while I pulled in here, and I can't remember what it was. I think that was it. I'm fully caffeinated, so it's not. I'm not going to allow the caffeine addiction to intensify, even though I might want to on some level. I shan't. All right. Well, and this is an interesting point from Freedom Grower, which is a clear conscience is not even necessarily tied to what is right, only what we know is right. What I would say is uh, that matter exists entirely within the context of identification versus so if I'm defining proper identification as consistent with my nature, being one with the most super intelligent force of love possible, aka light, highest levels of vibrational frequency. So I'm not capable. So that force is incapable of taking actions or experiencing states that would lead to, any sort of negative, guilt, shame, all of this, right? Um, Such that the, mechanism, which does seem to be built into most humans, although not all, and then we get into psychopathy and certain personality disorders, but and empathy, and all of this, or compassion, right? Um, However, I know that what exists within me is able to function as a perfect technology, meaning conscience uh, will not come into play except as a potential result of failure to properly identify within myself. If that makes sense. Hopefully it does. So this is, this is, it's not the solution. What I'm describing is not the solution like to all of life. Uh, it's actually seems to effectively, at a practical application within myself. And again, I'm learning a lot of this on the fly, which is a lot of the value of these broadcasts, I would assert. And I will at times get over my skis and just be flat wrong in some of what I say. That does occur. Not that often, but it does occur. However, more correctly, the discourse will not be entirely correct at times. Um, and even there, I performed a correction. Um, but my assertion is that conscience is only going to come into play as a result of thoughts or actions, but typically actions that result from me temporarily not practicing at the level of proper identification within myself. If that makes sense. And I think it does. So therefore, I would tie, and again, maybe I'm just different this way. Maybe I'm just a little different, but the way I seem to have been set up uh, within myself is, being someone who's self-critiquing and hard on myself, that there can be not a lasting guilt, but at least these negative states that are, correctly tied into, when I fuck up, I'm aware that I fucked up. But then also knowing within myself that the fuck ups are only ever the result of improperly identifying within myself. Therefore, the older versions of me would have logically understood Dick's assertion, but not fully at the level of mind, body, and spirit. Thus, like north. I'm fucked up. Fucking up here. Yeah, we made a left. Sorry about it. I think we did. We might be getting on the interstate the wrong way, but oh well. That happens every once in a while. No, we're going the right way. Thank you for your patience, other trucker. Other trucker. So, being properly identified in this moment, I'm unable to fear that as a concept. If that makes not that, and I'm not putting the onus on Dick for suggesting that it should have fear contained within it. But so my own proper identification leads me to be able to apprehend at the level of mind, body, and spirit aligned within myself and properly identified with my own true nature, that I have no concern over conscience, only concern over Uh, am I identifying properly within myself? Which is a very specific thing. And anytime I'm experiencing fear, shame, ridicule, whatever that may be, it's only ever a result of improperly identifying within myself. And then also, so to further, now here's a mechanism whereby one may train oneself is by attaching the pain that results from improper identification to place that pain where it belongs and to remind oneself, okay, for 5 minutes, I went through an emotional process within myself whereby I was experiencing negative states of being temporarily until I then remembered, oh, that's right, I'm failing to properly identify. Then I went back to proper identification. The negative states leave me, right? In that moment, the negative states go away and I no longer experience them. But then to remember and when that pain returns or when memories of the pain are present, to connect them with the failure to properly identify, and in fact will work as an effective stimulus, sort of a touching of a hot stove. And I've done versions of that within myself quite effectively over a period of what is going to soon be literal decades, plural, right? And that's something I was able to grasp within myself long ago, because the reality is, as a discrete being who had a desire to progress spiritually on a progression, there is no how, right? For me, there was a taking in of information, but there is no how to do that. And in fact, one of the best books I ever read that really helped me to even comprehend this well enough to speak on it was Jiddu Krishnamurti's book, The First and Last Freedom, which convinced me, or more correctly, that was the mechanism whereby I was convinced that it's in fact not possible to follow a man-made system, provided that another man made the system. I'm not able to get to where I'm trying to go to through somebody else's overriding system. What I am able to do is take bits and pieces of the larger wholes of other people's, like, cosmology or their own artifice or their own collection of systems, right? And I can take what works for me and leave the rest, see, as I've done, which is part of the fun of being a being in the realm, being a being, right? Beingness is to not have full access, seemingly, to those sort of systems. And in fact, out of necessity, one of the limitations of the being's progress will be the being's ability to develop systems of practice for themselves. And then, of course, the discipline to actually apply the practices, and then the wisdom or the ability to discern when is a specific practice appropriate to achieve a specific desired outcome, or to achieve part of what will then become an outcome, if any of that makes sense. Now, I noticed a few folks left, and I suspect the leaving is because of being indoctrinated, and I want to say blessed in, but actually not blessed in, cursed into society, right? Or a larger culture or community or society that has effectively or seemingly effectively acted upon an individual's conscience, but at a level of worthing or common sense of, well, this is what one does, this is how one behaves. in a given scenario at the level of these are the rules. If a person chooses to break the rules, then that person deserves the punishment, such as when a child is growing up in a home, in a family, and as myself happened, was then on a seemingly daily basis was physically struck as a punishment for what was uh, deemed as incorrect action. Right. What was being taught? I would argue that the only thing that was taught was a hot stove version of, "Hey, buddy, we're going to train you to monkey dance, and you're not monkey dancing the correct monkey dance for this context. So we're hot stoving you, meaning we're going to smack your hand or your bottom as a punishment for not monkey dancing correctly, instead of teaching me how to do a thing that they themselves weren't capable of," right? As truckers are, and part of me not being able to drive through here is every time I try to pass a truck, they speed up. Now, part of that is probably if they're actually watching their driving, they probably recognize if they want to speed but aren't willing to, if they can get me to speed, then they can follow behind me, right? So it could actually just be a clever, cunning strategy because I temporarily was going nearly 10 miles over the speed limit. And in fact, thank you to the AI disembodied voice telling me to slow the fuck down. It is not entirely useless, the voice, which I don't believe you folks are able to hear because of the noise canceling, although I'm not certain. I could be wrong there. And then just the human tendency to speed up when something is attempting to pass us, whatever that impulse is. So I suspect it's a what? It's a disorientation within the individual and a discomfort with when faced with a new idea that does what? That threatens the individual's belief system. Because again, now we're back to humans seek efficiency. Our biology seeks to be as efficient as possible. So to what is inefficient in the short term is to be forced into some sort of existential crisis or series of existential crises around examination of the whatever the current belief system is. So if part of the current belief system operates on incorrect behavior, not only is punished, should be punished. Well, I'm now asserting, well, actually, what's superior to that is to know and trust that when I behave in this realm consistent to my true nature, there is no reason to be. I'm incapable of acting in ways that society might choose to punish. And in fact, would be affirming the perfection of the society and attempting to affirm my own imperfection when I would say it's quite the opposite. Because that I am within me that I'm identifying with is perfect. It can't be an error. It can only not be that. It's either what it purports to be and proposes to be, or it's not. It is a 0 or a 1. It is that thing or it's not that thing. With no other alternatives. There are no other possibilities. And obsession with the slow merge is just, it's literally ruining driving right now for everybody. It's ruining driving, but particularly the big rigs, because we don't have the option of just going as fast as humanly possible to circumvent the slow merge. The vehicles are not capable. These big rigs aren't capable of that. So thus, the driving experience is ruined because people have developed patterns based upon, most of the time when they merge onto the interstate, you know, they may choose to, it may be better for them to choose to merge at a very low speed, which I would argue is dangerous and is in fact even more dangerous during rush hour traffic. But for whatever reason, this is what they've chosen to do. But see, society is not set up to punish that behavior. If society had designed itself in a way to punish them hot stove style, they wouldn't do it. Because then there would be shame and guilt attached. And that's what I'm addressing at the level of conscience. What I'm saying is, well, I now know at a level of direct experience that I'm not capable of experiencing conscience on that level, meaning I'm not able to behave based on something, a conscience that society may have attempted to install within me. And what I would say to the being is, being, until you go into your own self, until the being goes into themselves in their own sphere of influence and fully explores that space and reckons with what they think conscience is, I'm here to tell you what you believe being to be, to represent conscience within yourself, meaning conscience based upon your own, what you within yourself know to be right or wrong. I'm here to tell you, if what you are is what I am, and I can't ever be sure, but if for the purposes of this discussion, I and you are willing to accept that that is in fact versions of the same thing, I'm here to tell you that I have access to a perfect, what functions as a perfect technology, meaning as long as I identify properly within myself, I am not capable of doing wrong. Now, this could be a very dangerous thing in the wrong hands, because if a person is in a delusion, as I would assert someone like Jack Talcott is in a delusion, if someone is in a delusion that they cannot be in error, well, now they're in fact subverting their own conscience, which they're now freeing them up to perhaps at a level of antisocial personality disorder. I'm not diagnosing. I'm saying at least some of the aspects of antisocial personality disorder are a lack of conscience, right? To lack conscience. And now what a being might experience who's not suffering with aspects of antisocial personality disorder, which it would in fact be an inability to feel bad, a so-called lack of empathy, meaning the being is able to harm others and not, quote, feel bad about it, right? So the fear of the individual would perhaps be tied into, oh no, maybe I am, and I don't even want to say this, from the being's perspective, maybe they are a psychopath. And I would say, well, that would be an irrational fear. And in fact, the nature of emotion is irrational. Now, sometimes the emotion expresses in a way that is consistent with what is rational, right? But that's neither here nor there. So I'm not able at the level of effectiveness to interface with notions of conscience where that notion intersects with shame or fear or guilt. And as far as I can tell, conscience is set up, as many things are in society, based at least in part on a negative motivation, which is to avoid the experiencing of shame, fear, or guilt by air quotes doing the right thing. Well, surprise, surprise, what is the right thing is contextual, right? It's multi-layered, it's multifaceted, and it's in fact may not even be possible across the board in all scenarios. What is seemingly possible is to behave at the surface level in ways that virtually all individuals will agree is correct in a given scenario, when in fact that may not be the case at all. What may be appropriate and most moral in a given uh, coming together of two individuals in the physical space could actually begin as a conversation that could appear to be socially unacceptable in a given context or situation, part of which would be based upon whatever the mores, whatever the sociology is culturally, that at a level of a social contract, or what everyone's more or less tacitly agreed to go along with, right? But why are they choosing? Why have they tacitly agreed to go along with it? And by the way, who or what is served by the upholding of these social contracts? I would assert that it's almost always going to be for the system, by the system, to further reinforce the system. And now, see, that big rig that's been trying to get, that was hoping I would speed for it, it's finally given up and is going to do its own speeding. I'm only speeding at 3 miles over because I have a disembodied voice that's going to tell me to stop speeding. And it's trained me to go 3 miles an hour over the speed limit. And why has it trained me to do that? It's trained me to do that because the business model of this trucking company I'm working with is based upon paying a specific amount of money for insurance. And this insurance company says, okay, we will give a discount if you install these driver-facing cameras with this nagging AI voice. Because we, based on our business model, we then project that we will pay less expensive claims of gigantic, fiery, big rig rigs. Isn't that interesting? Well, it is to me. Now, we meaning, of course, the insurance company and its underwriters. Now, I would argue that society collectively lacks a conscience, or more correctly, a conscience that's based on the what is supposed to be, what was intended to be, the actual makeup of the discrete beings that comprise the mass. And I think I just remembered what I wanted to do when I stopped, was get some chocolate. My body seems to be craving the dark chocolate. But then it doesn't even matter, but that's okay. That's neither here nor there. The body seems to be wanting to make use of that, but it's not worth a stop at this time. Perhaps in the future, I will place the chocolate within arm's reach from the driver's seat perhaps. And then viewing myself at the level of a potential judgment, or, the idea that, without explaining the entirety of what it seems to me is happening as far as how and why one may or may not be inserted into this realm or matrix, I don't want to go into all of that right now. So I will then choose to trust that the audience knows what I mean. That, in my view, one of the major errors of most of the individuals who are seemingly in this place with me, in the now, is to not assign proper values to their own behaviors and how they perform in a given context or situation. Meaning, too much onus placed upon how will they be perceived temporarily by the beings who seem to be observing them, right? And then how that interplay happens within the being at the level of emotions and reinforcement of programming, the psychological mechanisms, how one views oneself, all of this going on at one time, but a lot of that at a subconscious level, some of it at a conscious level, and then very effective means within the human to make it feel uncomfortable to behave in certain ways in a given scenario, but then sidestepping or not even being aware of, well, I have a knowing and I understand that my life is a performance in a way, and I'm performing based on a progression towards an overarching goal, which is, if there's going to be a judgment or a critique of my performance at the end of this human experience, that should, although doesn't necessarily have to in the moment, that is a more important, or more correctly, that perspective or lens or filter is the appropriate lens or perspective or filter through which to assess how I'm performing moment to moment within this dystopian realm of death and destruction. Not how the realm itself and the beings who are mostly improperly identified, not with their own, not what may be within them their own true nature, which may very well be one with the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level. If the vast majority of all of the beings around me are misidentified virtually all of the time with not their own nature within themselves, within their spheres of influence, but in fact with the realm itself, and in fact what the Bible would refer to as this world, right? Meaning be in this world, not of this world, meaning don't identify with this world, don't identify with this world. Well, how? Well, I know the how. Okay, so if somebody says that to me, I'm the type of person who's stubborn enough to say, okay, how? And in the past, it would have been hey, I don't know, and you don't. I don't think you know either. So here's your challenge to answer your own challenge. You answer your own question. Now it's hey, maybe I'll give this person a quiz and see if they know, if they comprehend this to the level I do. Because to even be able to assert such a thing is to at least demonstrate some level of attainment, I would assert, in the moment. And by the way, these are the practices or the result of the practices, right? Which brings us back to a comment by a particular content creator on my recent live stream who seemingly was implying the invalidity of these discourses solely based on, in my mind, if that, and I'm not even going to say the name because it's not important, but you either know or you don't. I almost said it, but even if I did, it would be okay. If that being is performing at a level that that being could reasonably say, well, yeah, okay, Benton, I'm also operating on those levels and perhaps beyond. It does not discount the validity of the discourse by implying that perhaps he has a different mechanism of coming to all of these same conclusions. It doesn't negate the validity of my experience by saying, well, okay, Benton is getting there with a particular, by a particular means, therefore the thing is invalid. Absolutely not. The thing justifies itself through my own demonstration of the ability to perform all of this at all. I cannot be, and this is another throwing down of the gauntlet and a doubling down. What I am cannot enter into confusion. When I am properly identified within myself, true to my own essence or nature or soul, I cannot fall into confusion. I am incapable of falling into confusion, right? And so, whether or not that being intended that a spiritual attack, in some way that could represent a spiritual attack, meaning, are you sure, Benton? Are you certain of this? Because maybe you would choose to instead identify with certain aspects of this world, which would then reinforce at the levels of your own conscience, perhaps. Well, perhaps you're mistaken. Perhaps, Benton, you could or should correct yourself because irrationally, Benton, you may choose to identify with this world of death and destruction that is more than capable of fearing to perform incorrectly and to then be able to invoke a conscience, right? To be able to invoke a conscience, right? With some people, by the way, many of the folks who might act upon my own ability to experience fear and shame, and that may work with a mechanism referred to as conscience at times, based upon how I'm identifying and the folly or error or foolishness that could result from and most likely would result from misidentifying. Many, if not most of those beings, in fact, lack the ability to feel or to experience those negative states of being as a result of behaving in ways that would trigger a conscience. More correctly, they may not even have a functional conscience. They may not even be capable of empathy, although certainly capable of what? The mimicking of a being who, in fact, possesses or experiences those aspects. And what I've noticed with people who have traits of beings that lack empathy or lack it at the level of potentially being able to choose to develop it, instead of choosing to develop it, as perhaps I was in that state of being at one time, and in fact have chosen to develop whatever little bit was there naturally, I've chosen to develop those aspects of myself for my own purposes within my own sphere of influence. Instead of what? Using that as a blessing, which would then function as a curse in the lives of other folks, because then I would be able to use them in the way of the eurythmic song, which part of the lyric is, some of them want to use you, some of them want to be used by you, some of them want to abuse you, some of them want to be abused. So me, in the past, perhaps getting in where I fit in at the level of, oh, there's people who do respond seemingly favorably to being controlled by me or being, used by me in a way. And then, coming to understand eventually, oh, well, that's just not appropriate. And specifically, why is it not appropriate? It's not appropriate because I will never be able to get to the end of this experience and say and declare to whatever force or forces or intelligent or intelligences or spirits may be there to say, okay, we are the arbiter of critique of your performance now that you've gotten to the end of the dance, Benton, the monkey dance, right? And what was served by your series of monkey dances, Benton? Was the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level served, or was death and destruction served? Because there is no other alternative. At the end of this experience, I know within myself, at the level of direct experience, at the end of my performance, it will be critiqued in a way that will have mostly served the one force or mostly serve the other force, and then we'll go into one of two baskets. And that is what is meant by the separating of the wheat from the tares. And now I've proven or put my name on it that, okay, I've proven I know how to properly identify more often than not. And pretty pleased with sugar on top. Can we now accept universe? Can we now accept, all that exists, that there's no reason to send, if Benton can even be said to be this thing, again, what even is Benton, but now there's no need to, cordon off a section of the whole and put it into these exact circumstances. Now the energy has proven, well, wow, okay, actually I am the most super intelligent force of love possible, because I went into this exact discrete set of circumstances, this being known as Benton, and it did overcome all of those limitations and perform perfectly, or at least close enough to perfectly that there's no reason to repeat that specific trial. And in some way, is that not the simulation or the matrix, right? Is that not the simulation or the matrix? Is not the matrix or the simulation or this realm of death and destruction being, if it is owned and operated and ran by the antithesis of the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level, then is not my job here to operate all of this to bring forth a performance mostly consistent with my true nature in a realm of death and destruction that has all sorts of rewards built right in. And if I'm willing to perform based on what this realm of death and destruction puts forth as what should be honored and affirmed, it has all sorts of ways of rewarding and honoring. See? And while also doing what? Attempting to punish as much as possible everything that serves to affirm the validity of the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level, thus reaffirming the invalidity of the antithesis of that force, right? Which would be death, destruction, Satan, and all of these things. And what the realm is trying to get me to do right now is speed. And I would be going 60 if not for the lady who's going to repeatedly bleat at me to slow down. So now we're going to go 58. And now we got a bunch of trucks behind me that want to decide, well, are they willing to go fast enough to pass the person who's going 58 or not? And some just drive 65 to 70 through here no matter what, and they're going to get pulled over and written a ticket at some point. It's just a matter of when. Well, I'm doing my best to never be the one pulled over and written a ticket. And the GPS is based on, the estimation of when I will arrive is based on the posted speed limits anyway. So what does it matter? We'll just go 58 until I forget and start speeding again. Part of that is I'm used to having trucks that slow down when they come across a slower vehicle up ahead. The adaptive cruise control in this truck does not have the adaptive cruise control. And I'm not yet fully adapted to that reality. Although I have had trucks before without it. It's been a while. So back to the lens or the perspective, I'm actually not perfectly, but overall, I'm applying that lens of not a performance at the Love's truck stop that's consistent with the social contract, the average of all of the social contracts of whoever may be physically present, right? At the level of sociology and culture and mores, and there's another word I can't think of right now, whatever there's something in mores. Having not studied sociology in a long minute. And then also my fellow humans, such as a gal in her 20s that I maybe late 20s, early 30s, perhaps. Hard to tell with some of these folks. Anywhere from mid 20s to early 30s. But I'd peg her Gen Z, so I'd say closer to 25. But while realizing that I had interactions with her that predated a particular performance that she only caught part of, right? And then the day after, this morning, then interacting with her, and that's all based on her own psychology, her own, interfacing with sociology based upon, not that same overarching lens, which is why, by the way, this is a justification or a validation of this is a wholly, WHOLLY, individual. This is a wholly experience individually, because up until I can verify that each of the individuals who would be referred to as, well, we have the same purpose. And that's in fact how the entire discussion that ended up being almost 2 hours long, part of which, the more contentious parts of which happened both inside the truck stop near the checkout and then just outside the door of the truck stop, right? Which then other people would take to be used to critique, okay, what type of person is this? Or what type of people are these, right? Based on what? The criteria that would then be used to operate within me and within them at the level of conscience. And what I'm here to say is absolutely, except my conscience is going to be tied as close as possible to properly identifying with myself, and then also through this lens of or perspective of at the end of the overall performance, which is the series of performances or monkey dances, how is that going to be critiqued or judged? Because I am almost certain that it's going to be going to one of two baskets, meaning Did the overall performance serve, based on the judges' scores, did that serve the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level, or did it serve this realm of death and destruction? That's the overall goal or motivation. Well, we've got at least one of them's finally not willing to go 58 anymore. So he's passing. Because it's 55 for like many, many, many miles through this part of Pennsylvania for whatever reason. Probably because it's very heavily trafficked during the daytime. Lots of trucks, lots of cars. And you know, why should I have to drive this during the busy hours when I can drive it now when there's less traffic? Well, because the government mandated hours of service say, well, because Benton started his shift at 3:15 or 3, whenever that was, now he can't, now he must end his shift by 5:15 p.m. when the company and the dispatchers are working normal business hours, and they may not be set up to give me a pickup that will always fit within that shutdown time.
Reduce speed. Reduce speed.
And then also just a simple thing like if a person views my life and in the fact that I choose to earn money as a truck driver by performing this specific labor, then they may begin to word of mouth or make suggestions to me based on not comprehending that if I were to be out here getting speeding tickets, that I would then be less inclined to work as a truck driver. Because part of me working as a truck driver is based upon, well, I know, I reasonably am sure that I can quit my job for now up to a year at a time. And then as long as I don't job hop, meaning go from company to company to company to company, once they see, okay, well, he might quit after 3 months, but he's not going to quit 2 weeks in to go work for somebody else, thus actually wasting our time and resources. And in fact, we would probably, if he's quitting after 3 months and then taking an extended period of time off, he's probably quitting out of his own frustration. It's probably better for us that he quit instead of continuing to do the job with our equipment and go to our customer sites while being frustrated and had it up to here, you know. So but part of me being able to get rehired is if my driving record is not clean, it's going to make it hard for me to get a job, because most of the companies who are insisting upon only hiring drivers with effectively spotless records, they know as a trade-off, they're probably going to have to accept, they are choosing to be willing to accept somebody with a less of a solid work history, right? They're choosing a trade-off. So if I were to go out here and start getting tickets, I'm probably not willing to continue to work in this industry and not have the option of quitting unless my ability to tolerate the job levels up to some extent. See, which maybe it is, because if now I understand that the way to avoid most of the things that I have chosen in the past to allow to frustrate and annoy me is in fact the result of improperly identifying, which means every single time I meditatively become aware of my own annoyance and irritation, oh, bingo, bango, I've fallen away temporarily from proper identification. Bam, now I'm properly identified. Bam, the irritation and the annoyance is not present immediately. And this is my experience. As of a week ago, this is the new level I've reached. Bingo, bango, the feelings leave immediately. So, meaning when I do experience anxiety that may cause somebody to, in fact, even go on to psychotropic medication because maybe they are experiencing the fear and anxiety and the depression so often and so strongly that they're like, fuck it, give me the pills. They've relegated themselves to that. And I'm here to tell you, I don't know if you can do what I can do. I have no way of knowing that, but I'm here to tell you, I am now able to instantaneously move from anxiety, which is a form of fear, directly into love, which is my true nature. So if anxiety and fear is darkness, and I'm experiencing darkness temporarily because I've allowed the realm to impart, uh, spiritually attack me or motivate me through whatever means into temporarily misidentifying. The moment I shine the light, the moment
Speed.
Well, hopefully we weren't gone too long. I have no idea how long we've gone, but hopefully not too long because there was some. I've been dropping some gold bars up in here. Give me just a moment. I don't know if these people are taking the exit or if they've just chosen to drive as close to my trailer as physically possible or not. Probably taking the exit. I'm gonna wait, make them prove it. No, they're just no. Yeah, they are exiting. Okay, that at least makes some sense. Although still not a justification for driving as physically close to the bumper of the trailer as possible. Safety first, by the way. Oh, really? Okay, sure it's not. Be safe. The same person who'll tell me in the parking lot of the truck stop, be safe, goes right in their car and gets right in their car and immediately drives as close as they can to the DOT bumper of the big rig. That's the same person. Show me a human, I'll show you a hypocrite. Well, that applies to me also. Indeed, it does. All right, rush hour has begun. There it is. That's the first. And part of me being such an excellent truck driver is my pattern recognition. That formation moving, that exact style of formation moving at that speed from that intersection onto the on ramp, that means this is now rushing. They are on their way to work. Right. That grouping. This is now officially early rush hour, 5:30 a.m. Some places it starts closer to 6:30. Early rush hour here is 5:30.
Reduce speed. Reduce speed. Reduce speed. Reduce speed.
And then part of all of these systems also, not talking to one another. And, why doesn't the AI voice telling me to slow down not understand that the truck is designed that such that when the cruise control is set, the truck allows itself to speed, meaning if the cruise is set at 58, it will allow itself to speed up to then be able to shift into neutral and coast for a longer period of time in order to, which it's doing right now, in order to maximize potential fuel economy to save money, right? Which is in part is based on marketing. See, this says right lane closed, but I don't know if that can be believed or not. I need more clues before I get in the left lane and start blocking everybody. Too often there's a sign that says right lane closed, and no such animal. Yep, now we see the proof. Now here's another thing. Sometimes it's a brand new right lane. We're going from 2 lanes to 3 lanes, but it still says right lane closed ahead. And then so I end up in the leftmost lane when I could have just stayed in the center lane. That appears to be the case here, but I can't be sure yet. But I think so. Why is there no way to convey that? Why is that unconveyable? Sorry, Bubba, I held up Super Trucker, but it weren't my fault, sir. It's the or madam, probably a sir. Probably the fault of, definitely the fault of that sign back there. It could say like right lane closed ahead, total number of lanes remains unchanged. But then, you know, how many people would actually be able to figure out, well, what the fuck does that mean? And now we're in the wrong lane because we're there's an interchange, a meeting of interstates or freeways. So when somebody watches me perform as a truck driver, whether driving or just in other aspects of the job and in decision making and why I do what I do, they may not understand that, yeah, it's all connected to doing everything I possibly can to minimize the chances of getting tickets, while also knowing at times I'm still going to strategically choose to technically break the speed limit when I know it's likely not to result in me getting a ticket. And I've proven that by over coming up on 4 years of truck driving without ever being ticketed for speeding. Right. Thus, in some ways, proving, although, yeah, it could happen.
Reduce speed. Reduce speed.
Yes, this is a never-ending series of thinking I can get in the slow lane, and then, oh, that's right, the slow lane's about to end, or the slow lane's about to go exit only. Always fun. And of course, now that it's early rush hour, that heightens people's perception of I'm annoyed because big truck's in my way, or more correctly, I'm annoyed by the perception that big truck is in the way, whether or not big truck is in the way. Big truck may not, in fact, be in the way. Well, I was going to pull over and do what I need to do, and I'm realizing now I may have actually missed my opportunity. This is another part of being a truck driver, is needing to stop, and it's just 40 minutes of nowhere to stop. Like, that's absolutely within the realm of possibility at times. It's just totally normal. Oops, we done fucked up and entered into 40 minutes of impossible to stop. You know, meaning if we were to break down, we would just end up broke down in an area that we would never actually choose to stop in. And it's hard to see at night. Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure that's just happened. It's a bit of a bummer. But my age, I'm able to hold it. I don't need to be holding it. It's not good for my parts to hold it that long. Oh, I think we're okay. Good. We're actually getting onto an actual interstate. This is an interstate, but it's kind of both. It's partially not an interstate, if that makes sense. And it probably doesn't. So the same thing with the so back to the example of the getting into this conversation, which was somewhat, it started out somewhat contentious, And that's how I make friends a lot of, so-called drama bonding, right? And of course, humans respond to drama, meaning, you know, a calm, collected discussion without passion is probably going to draw nobody's attention. If maybe one or two people who may just be interested in intellectual type topics, but then the drama aspects are going to get almost everybody's attention. I think somebody was recording on their phone at a certain point. Almost certain of that.
Reduce speed.
Let's see, which exit are we taking?
Reduce speed.
Got to be on the turnpike. Nobody said a word to me about tolls, so I'm just going to assume that there's no care paid to avoiding tolls. Yeah, we done fucked up at the level of the bathroom break. That's a shame. That's a shame. There's a truck stop, but it's going to be absolutely jammed right about now. I have time, though. Just am I willing to have to sit there for 20 minutes, possibly, to just wait for a traffic jam? Let's see. Do I see a rest area? Hang on, bear with me one moment. I might see a rest area. Well, in fact, now I can't even get to the truck stop because I'm not able. Once I get on the turnpike, it's not really going to make sense to get back off to go to the truck stop. All right, we're just going to have to make it happen here and hope for the best. See if we can manage this without causing any problems. Yeah. All right, good deal. We caught a wide spot in the road, as Big L likes to call it. Merging back into traffic is going to be fun. We'll worry about that. We'll deal with that in a few moments. Ah, fuck. Got out of the seat and my gigantic feet immediately began catching on all sorts of cables, dislodging various whatever's down there, charging devices and charging cables. Oh, I got my new shoes, and it's funny because I talk about my size 12, but I actually have an 11 and a half historically, and then at a certain point, the shoes started getting smaller. Did anybody notice this? And so more often than not, back in the day, I was an 11 and a half, and then every once in a while, it would be like, okay, but in this shoe, I'm a 12. And then there would be some acknowledgement of they just aren't really, these shoes just run small or big or whatever. Small, I guess. All right. Half size small. Got to go up a half a size. And then eventually that started morphing into more and more often. It was just, if I was buying a pair of shoes I'd never bought before, it was 12 more than 11 and a half. And for whatever reason. So I got these new $38 hiking shoes, on the cheap from China or wherever. And I've been wanting to try them out anyway. And they're actually what a 12 used to be, meaning they're too fucking big. Right. So I guess I'll send those back. I don't think I've ever returned anything to Amazon ever. So that'll be interesting. Because who knows? I have to go. I have some packages at a Whole Foods with an Amazon return, counter. So maybe I will. We'll see. We shall see. Might just find somebody to give them to. And I remember there was these Salomons I used to really like. I used to get them on Amazon for like $100. But they would wear. They were great shoes. They're hiking shoes, but they would wear out. They were trail running shoes. Technically, they would wear out in like 3 months. I wore a 12 wide in those. I was like, I'm not a wide. It's like, what is this? Are people just, people are turning into pussies, I guess. So I guess I should have known. It's like, oh, okay, well, if they're making these in China, maybe they're going more by what 12 used to be, right? Or what a 12 is supposed to be. If that makes any sense. Yeah, I think it probably does. Yeah, the dark chocolate's been treating me real good lately, but I'm realizing I'm just eating too much of it. Not from a calorie standpoint. In fact, that's probably why I'm eating too much of it. I'm eating too much based on what my organs want to deal with. So now I'm going to eat less. And it's quite satisfying and filling. I'm doing the 90%. I would go to 100 if they had it. I didn't see any 100%. Of course, this is that Lint brand, which is known for lead and cadmium, unfortunately. But pretty much all dark chocolate is going to have that to some extent. But whatever. Since this is they sell this at Walmart. I mean, I'm sure it's not the best, but oh well. Oh well. Do 3 pieces. I think it's 200 calories. Yeah, 16 grams of fat, which is good. Fat's good. This is brain food right here. Cocoa butter, and it's got the theobromine for the cognition and the stimulant effects. Which people say, oh yeah, chocolate has caffeine. It's like, yeah, it has small amounts of caffeine, but I would assert that the most of the stimulant effect would be the theobromine. If I'm saying that correctly, and I'm sure I'm not. Bromine, whatever. Anyway, bear with me while I consume this chocolate. Make sure my toothbrush is at the ready. Although apparently I've been fucking up my teeth by not waiting like 30 minutes to brush my teeth after eating the chocolate. All these little things that I just did not know. I've been sitting here the whole time without my flashers on. That's unlike me. Oh, I guess so. Also, the transmission on this truck is starting to. I can tell it's either just going to fail entirely or it's definitely going to need some sort of service. Because I can tell by the way it's shifting. Of course, as a truck driver, I'll be treated like, well, what? He's just a driver. What could he possibly know? There's really no point in telling anybody that, oh, yeah, I can tell it's about to go out. Oh, fuck. Hang on. I set this chocolate down, and now I don't know where I put it. Where did I put the chocolate? I had to put both hands on the wheel. Did I lose the fucking chocolate? Fuck. I did. Damn it. Oh, there it is. No, that's not it. Mother fuck. What a bozo. Where would I have put the chocolate? Yeah, I had to get both hands on the wheel real quick, and I don't know where. Oh, there it is on the seat. Okay, good. That makes sense. Anyway, eating on mic, so bear with me.
Reduce speed.
Yeah, bring that down, in fact, reducing my speed. Oh, an actual toll booth. Keep moving. Slow your ass down to 15. Keep moving. Save big with easy pass like that. We'd really save if y'all weren't charging us to use the fucking road. Well, we're not going to Philadelphia, but that's what the sign says. East of Philly. I picked up and delivered in the city limits of Philadelphia a few times. Not too many, but a few. Sorry for eating, but it needs to happen. I'm going to have three of these. I think two is going to end up being the right amount. We do that a few times a day, probably 2 to 3 times a day. Yeah, here's the service plaza, 2 miles, but they're completely fucking jammed this time of the morning, oftentimes. All right, almost done. Well, I think I covered all the spiritual stuff, all of that. Unless I think of more. Anyway. Yeah, I think one of the last things I was talking about was, having to do with, how often people will address, this idea that, you know, humanity collectively has a purpose, and maybe it does, right? But, whose purpose, who or what, you know, is the purpose. So I think a lot of folks would just assume that the purpose would have to be a purpose, that would in some way directly, the purpose would be designed to benefit humanity itself. And what I would say is, well, what are you basing that on? Wouldn't that be an assumption, or dare I say presupposition, right? Like what is it not possible, especially in the context of spiritual war and you know the potential for other types of beings and all of this, other forces, right? Like, why is it just a given that humanity collectively would always have to have a common purpose, and that common purpose would have to serve humanity itself? And by the way, in a way that we believe would lead to a positive, peaceful, fulfilling, loving outcome for presumably all of humanity. And then, is that even possible? Right. That would also have to further suppose that humans are capable of achieving that of their own, what's inherent upon them. By the way, within what I contend is a realm of death and destruction that seemingly rewards many aspects of undertakings and behaviors that reinforce that system of death and destruction itself, right? And that, in fact, that is a great proving ground, or it is able to function as a proving ground and an area in which a person such as myself can prove and show and prove what I'm really made of, and my own ability to figure things the fuck out for myself within myself, instead of this common sensing and word of mouthing based on what other folks, might deign DEIGN to be appropriate. But yeah, appropriate for whom, on what basis, in service of what? Until those specific questions are answered to my satisfaction, I'm not willing to accept these notions out of hand. Simply not. And the fact is, many folks find it inconvenient for something they may view as just, this is, well, of course it's this way, but that's the common sensing and the word of mouthing. It's like, well, I'm here to tell you, I'm Benton, and I'm here saying, and not only is that not the case, if you're going to assert that what the other person is taking as just a given and common sense, well, now I'm going to need you to show your work. Now we're going to have some version of discourse and debate, right? And then what ended up happening was that person had to bring their game up in order to match wits with me, and was at least able to partially demonstrate the validity of parts of their assertions, although having to abandon the original assertion, which was based on a notion that I and they have the same purpose in this world, when absolutely not. And in fact, I got them to agree. Eventually, they agreed with all of my assertions around why that's not the case. They just weren't willing to agree within the context of, well, I'm right and you're wrong. But then that's just typical human fashion, right? That's fairly typical for humans, even myself at times. Although I did eventually, in a certain way, say, well, in fact, you've won the debate in this arena, so I give up. You've caught me. I made a blunder. Well, and again, that was the person was able to show their own intelligence by waiting for me to make a blunder after they had made a blunder, and then maneuvering, and then the conversation taking place in other arenas, and then waited for me to fuck up, to step on my dick, and then I was like, okay, fair enough, you caught me. And that was actually the common ground after I was demanding that they own their own words, because much like I've called out Jack Talcott in the past for distancing himself from his own words on his own website, I'm now saying you're not even willing to own your own words that you spoke inside the truck stop 5 minutes ago. So, like, more or less, like, why would I even have a conversation with you? Right. And some people are going to view that as, oh, Benton's a bully and he's trying to bully somebody. It's like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, bullying actually, in my mind, serves a purpose. It can be a good thing. I don't know that society's been well served by its attempts to completely eliminate bullying. Meanwhile, this is a grown adult man who can just walk the fuck away anytime he wants to. He's probably not willing to, but how can I bully him? But number two, I'm I have white privilege in the mind of the Gen Zer. See, if that lady who watched part of this is in fact Gen Z, culturally based on her indoctrination and the creation of her psychology, my pale skin confers privilege on me, and I happen to be having a conversation with a black man, and early on was in fact asserting my superiority in spiritual development and intelligence. By the way, that's in my, people say, oh, astrology is not correct or whatever. It's right there in my birth chart. One of the uh, interpretations of like some of the aspects of my birth chart is like more or less that I intentionally behave in extravagant fashions to specifically shock my companions. Like I'm clearly utilizing, from my perspective, I'm utilizing aspects of my own personality, you know, for a specific effect. That, by the way, facilitated a much deeper conversation that I would say never would have happened. The deeper, valuable healing, what I would say to be the actual healing, spiritually healing aspects for both parties of the conversation, was facilitated by my own inborn characteristics of intentionally shocking people for effect at times in an extravagant fashion, by the way, which I absolutely did. And then also understanding psychology enough to know when I walked back into the truck stop this morning, now Gen Z won't talk to me, who went from giving me attention and, having a back and forth enjoyable conversation. But I don't need to go in there now. It's fine. I know how to read body language. So now some would say, how do you know the closed off body language is for you? Because when I walked in, she was having banter with a person who may or may not be a local regular. Could be somebody she sees every morning, could be another random truck driver. Either way, she's at least not in such a foul mood that further evidence, because the person who goes in there every morning in typical male fashion might be like, well, what's wrong? It's like, and something I know very well of humans and certainly women is, that we don't always behave the same in all situations. Like some folks would say, oh, well, a person working at a truck stop is supposed to always behave the same. I'm like, absolutely not. If they think I've behaved in a way which I now need to be treated as if I'm supposed to be ostracized based on sociology, then of course now she's no longer open to having a conversation with me. Guess what? Who cares? I did my conversing with her yesterday, and then it was never going to come to a deep level of spiritual conversation, right? That was going to represent what I would assert is something that the Bible means when it says when two or more are gathered in Christ's name, that is the church, right? And even having that portion of the conversation in the moment as that's happening, right? And then both of us are just tickled pink that thing that we both understand is a thing is happening right now. And we're both saying, referring to Christianity while simultaneously saying, I don't call myself a Christian. So I actually had come across a very like-minded person. And something about me knew to utilize the more flamboyant, off-putting, parts of my personality that are able to awaken within another. He probably needed to be sort of awakened out of his slumber. He certainly wasn't coming across as an intelligent person, but then again, there was a language barrier, and then not much of one, and then also he's from the Congo, and you know had did not have a reason to shift into, oh, I'm a brainiac also, right? Not that I am that, but in certain ways I'm predisposed for intellectual discourse, right? I want to make things intellectual as much as possible. So it took him a little while to shift the transmission to be able to match where I started from. But it turned out he was able to get there, and then probably in some ways was able to surpass, where I was able to go to in certain ways. But then the interesting part again was it was revealed that has a wife and kids, young children. So he's more set up for business mindedness. So apparently his entire purpose in the United States is to come here and to use the opportunities that America provides to make enough money to secure his ability to provide for his family in his home country in the future, right? By coming to America, and then by what? By serving what America and the systems here say we're willing to reward you by what? Moving our goods and services with not one truck, but two trucks, which he drives a truck, and then he owns a truck that somebody else drives. But then the way this all got started was began to bemoan, that his other driver continues to tear up the equipment. Now, part of that may just be the equipment is used and it breaks anyway. And part of that may be, his driver probably doesn't give a fuck about the equipment. And by the way, why should he? But, I do my best to not tear up the equipment, but sometimes, the equipment's going to have wear and tear. So part of that was I just immediately, after he showed himself willing to engage in a back and forth, because I'm not going to attempt to force somebody into an interaction. And I do have these skills. Once he consented enough to an interaction that I felt okay with taking it there, that I then accused him of trying to get rich. And then also at the level of a social contract, and then the toxic positivity part of this is many folks may not be willing to own the fact that, well, he is trying to get rich in a sense. He's trying to get rich so that he can go back to the Congo and have a piece of property and probably just buy an existing business, I'm assuming, or have the money to start his own business or some combination thereof with some assurance of, if he behaves, consistent with his own business acumen as as an intelligent person and of high, understanding and attainment, potential to attain in the business world, that then his children can be raised, the way he was raised, and probably even better, right? Which some would argue that is the American dream, or at least in part, right? Except it's no longer desirable to do that here. So part of the early conversation, once we got past the argument and the disagreement and the contention, there was, some discussion of how undesirable it is to do a lot of that in America. And by the way, the MAGA types, the more conservative leaning types, seem to take for granted that, well, of course, that's still a thing in America. Of course, America is still a great place to raise one's children. Well, not across the board, right? It's not, and by the way, and just, I would say, I have gone to effectively all of the parts of the country with a few exceptions. I would say virtually everywhere, there's aspects of raising one's children that are no longer line up with the Aussie and the Harriet. Just the smartphone, just the AI, right? Well, the Congo is experiencing the drawbacks of AI and the smartphone, but not to the levels that America gets all the worst forms of that first, for whatever reason. That's what it is to live in this particular part of the dystopia. And how quickly are his children going to have a device in their hands with just the unlimited pornography? Just that has changed people's brains. Just that has changed society. Your average MAGA bozo who believes that they're traditional family values conservatives will absolutely refer to specific types of pornography when it suits them, right? The idea of, I won't even get into it. Just take my word for it or don't. I don't even want to. I don't want to bring up specific imagery because that's not my conscience, freedom grower. It's that in order to introduce those details, I would have to cease identifying with my true nature, which is one with the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level. And I would then need to identify with aspects of this realm that are aligned with death and destruction, such as to begin to describe pornography. Whereas in this case, I'm going to refer to it in a way where I'm going to assume that we all know what I mean. And some of us will begin to have experience specific imagery. I don't, thankfully. I used to. Now I don't. Hmm. And then the last time I chose to subject myself to that phenomenon, it was so disgusting. And how disgusting was it? Exactly as disgusting as it always has been. It's just that I was desensitized to such levels of disgust, or more correctly, more titillated. My titillation overcame how disgusting it is. And I just said, okay, this is the last time. Unless I commit an error for which I would then confess, repent, ask forgiveness, and be forgiven. But, you know, uh, yeah, no more. No more. Been there, done that. Why continue to go back to that well? And also, again, unable to go to that well without being acutely aware in the moment that this is a result of misidentifying within myself. So why even bother? You know, and, certain physical, things that need to happen that will happen regardless of the existence of a phenomenon known as pornography. So whatever. Shout out to the chat. Clump in the house. I see young Jim down there. I'm realizing now I'm going to have to slide the tandems. Do I need to stop again to do that? I technically would be able to wait until I get to the place I'm delivering, but I'm already catastrophizing around holding everything up while everybody waits while I slide my axles, in the entrance/exit of the facility. That's as small as it's the exact smallest size to maneuver based on the size of a shorter rig than the one I'm driving, because it's going to be mostly day cabs in and out of there. And then whoever's like me driving a sleeper cab don't come there, may never come back, so who cares about them, right? They're on their own. And then, my contention back during the fake pandemic of all of this 6 feet social distancing, and I was working with these concepts around my own energy sphere, and more or less that does seem to be about 6 feet in diameter, maybe slightly shorter. So, this idea of staying 6 feet apart, it seemed to me like there was, from the system's perspective, while convincing people that they're ill or may become ill, even if they're not any more predisposed to illness, just being stressed out and fearful around illness medical science would probably say that state, that state of being hormonally or whatever would probably create a condition in the body where the person, just based on that, would be more likely to become ill. It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way during the pandemic, the fake pandemic. And then beginning to recognize, to me, that's what's meant by when two or more are gathered in the name of Christ, whatever that is. Again, if that's some description of some aspect of the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level, right? Or more correctly, what may in fact be our own true essences, right? Which is when one particular famous creator in this space YouTube channel likes to say we are all one at the highest level, which I buck that in the way that I believe he means it, but it does seem to be true, at least in a way, all right? Although I would still want to know exactly what I'm still not willing to say it that way simply based on, I would need to be very specific about what is meant by we, exactly who is being addressed by this we. And when I hear we, I'm just immediately assuming that I'm being included in that, whether I want to be or not, right? Which is a form of, at least aspects of narcissism. It's not the full shot, but it's part of that thing, whatever that is. Narcissistic personality disorder. Thankfully, I suffer with no disorders, thankfully, which is why I'm not disabled, by the way. Yeah, I'm not autistic in that, if I was autistic in the way the system says is autism exists, I would have had to go to mental health services by now. The fact that I'm able to conduct myself outside of going to jail or judges ordering me into psych evaluations, means, according to this, as far as the system is concerned, I do not even have autism spectrum disorder. Am I convinced that certain aspects of autism are contained within me? Absolutely. What is autism? Well, as far as I can tell, it's a collection of behaviors all within the normal range for humans, collected together and described as one thing. So yeah, also known as normal for humanity, by the way. Okay, so who cares? AKA normal, meaning I'm not disabled. Because some folks have probably assumed I could just have gotten on SSI or SSDI in the past. Yeah, probably. Especially when apparently it was really fucking easy to get it. But someone who's unwilling to view themselves as disabled can't go get on disability. Because in my world, only a disabled person can go get on disability. And I will not affirm my own lack of ability because I don't lack ability. I'm not willing to, in exchange for Federal Reserve notes, to put out there to the realm. I'm not willing to throw down that gauntlet to the realm and say, well, in fact, I lack at the ability when it comes to attaining, I lack. No, I don't. Absolutely not. I might lack what this realm tries to tell me I'm supposed to be able to perform, to serve it as a slave of it. And no man can serve two masters. I can't serve this realm of death and destruction. If a man cannot serve two masters, Christians, then I cannot serve this realm of death and destruction, because that would preclude me from serving what? The master of my own true nature. And yes, I am bodacious and ostentatious enough to say that what I'm supposed to be serving is in fact contained within myself, because the kingdom of God is within me, Christians. If your book is correct, meaning what I'm supposed to serve is the kingdom of God, whatever that is. Now, if I'm willing to say, okay, if God is love, and if I'm willing to define love as the most super intelligent force of love possible at the highest level, then I am that thing or that phenomenon. et al. Therefore, I will go into myself and connect with that kingdom of super intelligent love that vibrates at higher and faster above everything else. Thank you very much. And in order to do that, I will serve that force. And I cannot serve that force and also serve the forces of this world of death and destruction. And guess what, folks? If all of the rest of you would do what I'm now doing most of the time, although not perfectly, then this heaven or hell realm, presently manifesting as a hell realm, would most likely, in my estimation, begin the process of discontinuing the creation or manifestation of a hell realm moment by moment, and would eventually begin to manifest as a heaven realm. Wow. And if that's not true spiritual attainment and knowledge demonstrated in the moment, I don't know what is. And you probably don't either. If I don't know, I'm willing to bet you don't either, based on what I see, at the risk of offending the potential listener. And yes, I'm willing to go there at times. And based on how I'm feeling right about now, I'm going to go ahead and assume, since it seems like not the dopamine, these are not dopamine hits. This is the release of endorphins and all sorts of chemicals into the bloodstream. And in fact, I'm feeling a healing effect, because back to the assertion of when two or more are gathered in the name of whatever that is is written in that book about Christ, whatever's meant by that, my assertion that when two or more people come together in the physical space, and my contention that the energy spheres overlap and there is an exchange of energies, and on some level that is healing for both people, and then that can be even more healing for both people, I would assert, as if both people are aligned with themselves, within themselves, at the level of mind, body, and spirit, serving that force that's referred to as Christ in the Bible. We can call it many things. Whatever that is, I might prefer Holy Spirit in this moment. And I'm here to tell you, between the rest and the relaxation and the recent spiritual attainment and whatever healing Christ visited upon my being via that interaction with that fella, and whatever I might have to assume was visited upon him, that's real. That's what I aim to serve. And it's not served by presupposing and imagining what would such service look like beforehand, and assuming it involves, well, the entering into buildings, the joining of a flock, or even worse, the leading of a flock, right? Because a lot of people would say, well, now based on my demonstration of ability, I must go make my entire vocation about earning money leading a church or a flock. What calamities, such calamities, would potentially befall old Benton here, were I foolish enough to undertake such an endeavor? I might still wander into a tent revival eventually and set the stage on fire metaphorically, and then get the fuck out of there and then dip out. And now cars driving like semis can't get up the hill because they're driving like a semi that can't get up the hill, holding us all back. You're slowing everything down because y'all are driving like you're doing an imitation of that semi right there. Why, not you, the listener, but why are they doing that? As the transmission yet again refuses to upshift. Now, that could be a software issue. Probably next time I turn the rig off, I should kill the battery long enough to reset these settings. Maybe that'll fix it. Restart the old computer. Go back to the default program at least. Reboot. Your data is an error. And that's what it is to be a human in this system with a psychology that was designed, and installed by the system itself to serve the system itself. And this, in a realm of death and destruction, is to be running code that, at least in part, if not almost fully, is serves death and destruction. Reboot. And this is what we mean by waking up not being a thing. Well, if the waking up is a rebooting of the system, but if I was actually became aware enough to have gone into the computer system and killed some of these processes or demons, but then I failed to tell the script that is ran every time the system boots up after I go to sleep, because waking up implies sleep and now awakening from a slumber. Well, what happens if when I was awake, I killed these various processes or demons, I exorcised these demons, except now when I'm asleep and then I wake up the next morning, the system reboots and that script got ran and it restarted all those processes that I had manually killed with keystrokes from the command line by opening a Linux terminal window in this analogy. Well, now we're running all that code that serves death and destruction again. And if I'm not vigilantly serving the most super intelligent force of love possible within myself, guess what? Now I'm going to go right back to defaulting to serving death and destruction, which is what I assert virtually all of humanity does, which is why the heaven or hell realm continues to manifest as a hell realm. That's the why and the how. But the why. Why is this happening? Because of the fallen state of humanity. And folks, certain folks in these so-called truth communities cannot handle that truth. And if that results in me and that truther, so-called, not a truther, by the way, truther, not a truther, can't be friends in the short term, so be it. Perhaps we will become friends again and realize perhaps we were friends all along, or never friends in the first place. All of this is seemingly possible. Now they've updated the software. They fixed something that's not broken. And the GPS software is now repeatedly telling me about the weak GPS signal, which I'm going to assume is the exact same signal it's always had. It just had not been updated to tell me about the weak signal, as if I'm capable of making the signal stronger, which I'm not. So what even is this? So now nag me and I can't fix it. So they've this app that I pay money for continues to fix what is not broken, thus, from my perspective, breaking itself. Thanks for nothing. Well, I do need to plug my main phone into charge, and this may actually break the part where my phone on 5G is not good at, and probably a lot of people's phones, it's not good at managing that handoff from one tower to the next. But for some reason on 4G, when I'm in battery saver, LTE, it does it no problem. It rarely, if ever, bungles the handoff from one tower to another. On 5G, for whatever reason, it bungles it a lot somehow, which I think I know why, but that would get into the fact that at one point I was a Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer, or MCSE, on Windows 2000, which, yeah, a long time ago, but I was made to study and understand the protocols that whereby a lot of this stuff operates, or I chose to, rather. So some of that remains with me to this day. Some you could probably give me some version of a multiple choice quiz on TCP/IP networking and subnet masks and all of this. I'm not able to explain it off the top of my head very well, but I could probably do fairly well on a multiple choice test, thus demonstrating some level of understanding, or at least an ability to do really well, to score even higher than I otherwise should on a multiple choice test based on my own undiagnosed fake autism / super high functioning retarded person. It's like, yeah, we can't tell he's some version of Corky from the Wonder Years, because what if Corky from the Wonder Years could go to school and do really well on multiple choice tests, even when compared to the so-called normal students, right? It doesn't mean Benton is normal because of the super high functioning aspect. It's merely a person who's probably not normal and is retarded on some levels, by definition retarded, who's super high functioning enough to cover up and make up for some of those what would otherwise be shortcomings. I would say the shortcoming is the system giving me a multiple choice test in the first place. Why doesn't the system understand that, well, that's not the way to judge Benton's acumen? Because I can probably pass a multiple choice test. If you did pass or fail at F, if D is passing, I can probably pass pretty much any multiple choice test, whether I even know the material or not, just based on my own aptitude. So thereby, I would say that's not a proper means for testing my ability. But then again, what's the system of death and destruction set up to do? What is the purposes of the system of death and destruction? Is to run your children, MAGA. It's to take your children, MAGA, traditional family values, MAGA Americans, and run them through the gauntlet of what? Corporatism, to make them all fit into little boxes so that corporations and human resources can more effectively address and utilize them at the level of how many of these like boxes can we create. Part of that is we're going to make every one of these individuals that is able to take this test and score above a certain score goes into one box, so that we can hopefully put them into another box and another box and another box, right? Which is, okay, we've ended up with a retard, but the super high functioning led them into a box where technically they are able to perform what the system of death and destruction and corporatism and business wants them to perform, but it hurts them, meaning me. The individual suffers to a much greater extent with anxiety, fear, negative states of being, the beating up of oneself, the misapplication of things like fear, shame, feeling like I've done something wrong, guilt based on conscience, which is because I never was intended to go into that space. I probably, without the corporate overlay and the death and destruction being served above all, death and destruction being served as the master of this realm by the majority of the individuals in this realm, and that thus leading to the creation of a hell realm of death and destruction, I was probably intended to be some version of a shaman, most likely. Some expression of whatever that is. Most likely. Some version of a shaman, exorcist, some version of a spiritual practitioner, most likely. Right. Which is okay. That's fine. I've demonstrated my super high functioning enough. I don't need to continue. What good is it to continue to lean on that? It doesn't benefit me. And in fact, I'm happy to just let it lie dormant, the super high functioning, even as other people are very aware of it and probably would prefer, hey man, how about jump to it, buddy. We can tell that you have go to it, buddy. Why aren't you springing into action? We can detect you have, yes, of course, I have that tendency and propensity. I've overcome the limitations of always reflexively leaping into problem solving solely based on this ability to be super high functioning. When in fact, I tend to identify more closely with short bus retarded special person. So much so that when the short bus is there at the super center and they're all the special people are waiting around for the bus to be told to go get on the bus, and I've just checked out with my super high functioning. I'm about to go climb into my big rig. I kind of feel like if I hang out near them, I kind of feel like I am them to some extent. Like I kind of belong with them. And I sort of feel like they get it, like they kind of feel that way too. Now, maybe I'm inventing all of that. I don't know. But it seems to be real. So that means something, right? Even that I'm able to detect that that's what's happening without seeing the bus. And by the way, the person who's their minder has said, okay, wait here at this bench because I'm going to the bathroom and I'm going to be back in 3 minutes. Stay here. And knowing, okay, they will reasonably stay here. But I can't leave them for 30 minutes because they're going to wander off eventually. And so how do I know that that's what's happening? And then, hey, look, here's their minder. And I'm like, hey, how's it going? And I may have a high functioning conversation with them and then go right back to my big rig, right back to something of the experience of the retarded person. And they're having the same experience without the super high functioning layers. Are we really that different? And that's, by the way, blessing / curse, as far as I can tell. Right? Blessing / curse. It's all blessings. Well, if it's all blessings, it's all curses in this realm of duality, right? Or duality. Is that the duality? All blessings are curses and all curses are blessings? I don't fucking know. Makes logical sense to me. Seem to make sense to me. Anyway, I guess I could keep yakking, but I think I'll get off and eat some food. Thanks for listening. Bye.